competitiveness. With that, I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Cecilia. So the pandemic and the economic crisis have undermined the health and well-being of women and children in the United States. There are now 4.2 million fewer women working than there were in February of 2020, in large part because of the pandemic. Millions more women have had to reduce their hours, often because taking care of the children is a responsibility that continues to fall disproportionately on women. Our economic recovery depends on us addressing the barriers that have hampered women from fully participating in the labor force. So here's the good news. The American Rescue Plan will change the course of the pandemic and deliver immediate relief and support to women, families, and their communities, critical to building a more equitable economy. The plan will increase the child tax credit from $2,000 per child to about $3,000 per child, and even more for a child under the age of 6. This means a typical family of 4 with 2 young children will receive an additional $3,200 in assistance to cover the costs associated with raising children. This will benefit 66 million children. The plan will also increase the earned income tax credit for 17 million workers by as much as $1,000, benefiting many cashiers, food preparers and servers, and home health aides, those frontline workers who have helped their communities get through this crisis, many of whom are women, many of whom are women of color. The plan also expands child care assistance, helping hard-hit child care providers who are disproportionately women of color cover their costs. And it will give families an additional tax credit to help them cut their child care costs. Families will get back as a refundable tax credit as much as half of their spending on child care for children under age 13, so they can receive a total of up to $4,000 for one child or up to $8,000 for 2 or more children. If we add it all up, these are historic actions that will not only help rescue our economy, they will help support our country's women and their families. But we know, as Cecilia pointed out, we have to do more to close the wage gap and to take steps to ensure that all women, especially women of color, have their shot to get ahead. And so with that, we will take some questions.
Okay, Jennifer, kick us off. Okay, thanks. Question for you both. This is on racial economic gaps. During the campaign, President Biden talked about wanting the Federal Reserve to close income gaps, and he wanted to measure the progress they make in closing those racial economic gaps. Would you be willing to say if any steps have been taken so far towards requiring that sort of thing? Is the White House still interested in talking to Congress about amending the Fed Act to require some sort of measures?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. So I can't speak to that exactly at this time. What I can say is that this administration, across the administration, we are committed to addressing the racial wage gaps and racial inequity gaps. I can say at the CEA, for example, we are using data to understand the impact of all of our policies when we study what's happening in the economy. We want to look at how it's not just affecting the average, but looking at all groups. And I would also mention that when Chairman Powell testified yesterday, I think it was just yesterday, and last week, he pointed to the fact that as the Federal Reserve is doing its monetary policy, it is looking not just for the average unemployment rate to change, he is looking to see that the economy is doing well for everybody. So, we are very aligned in that. Go ahead.
Thanks for doing this. Josh Boak with AP. Lots of Americans thought educational attainment would close the gender wage gap and racial inequality. But in fact, if you look at college grads, the gap widens between men and women. Some of that is due to age, but what are the factors driving here? Why hasn't educational attainment delivered more?
I'm happy. Yeah, so, educational attainment was actually very instrumental in making some of the gains between my daughter, for the wage gap when I was coming up and my daughter. So we know that women getting higher years of schooling was very important in the early years. But now we know that women on average are getting more schooling than men. So that is why it is not contributing as much. And what we see then is that there are other factors. So we see that the wage gap among young adults is actually fairly small, and it opens up particularly when women start families, which is why the care economy and the efforts we're making to ensure that workers, not just women, but all workers, can balance work and family is going to be so important. We also know that flexible workplaces is very important for helping workers to balance work-life, the work responsibilities and job responsibilities. Claudia Golden at Harvard, for example, has found that the wage gap is smaller in occupations such as pharmacists, where there's just more flexibility baked into the occupation. So there's still more work to be done, and I think it really goes to helping women in particular, but all workers balance responsibilities of family and work.
Karen?
Heather, you had cited the statistics on 4.2 million fewer women now in the workforce than before COVID. The president has said that women dropping out of the workforce during the pandemic is a national emergency. Are there new measures under discussion now specifically on that issue to reintroduce women back into the workforce, part of the Build Back Better plan, and what can be done to bring them back in?
It's a great question. The most important thing that we need to do is wrap our hands around this pandemic. Right, so the steps that were taken as a part of the American Rescue Plan to, deal with the health crisis, make sure that the vaccine gets out, all of those things, that is certainly going to be an important step forward so that schools can reopen safely. And then, of course, there are funds